morning, everybody. Just waiting for a few people to come into the waiting room and then we'll begin. Right, my name's Sarah Reeves and I am an advisor with the T-Level and T-Level Transition Programme. I'd like to welcome you to this particular breakout session. Just to remind you, this is 3.4 and this is mapping technical outcomes for the T-Level Transition Programme. So the purpose of this breakout session is, I'm going to pass you over to my colleague in a moment, Mark Johnson, who is a curriculum manager for computing and games, part of the TEC partnership. He's going to showcase how to create an outstanding T-level transition study program, which maps to the technical outcomes. After the presentation, there will be some discussions. We've got 4 discussion points that Mark and I would like to share with you, and that will be the opportunity for you to sort of ask Mark and myself some questions. I will be monitoring the chat through the session as well. So once we've finished the presentation and discussion, what we'll do is we'll look at some emerging themes from the questions within the chat. So please, as my colleague has just said from the events team, post any questions. Any questions that we can't answer at that particular point in time, obviously, we will get back to you with the right type of response as well. So I'm going to hand you over to Mark to start his presentation.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this morning. Hopefully you get the information you need on the national technical outcomes. So I'm just going to share my screen and we will make a start. Can everyone see my screen okay? Lovely, I got a thumbs up, that will do for me. So my name's Mark Johnson. I am the curriculum manager for digital computing and games at the Grimsby Institute, which is part of the tech partnership. So this session is mapping national technical outcomes for T-level transition programs. So within GIFI, we was actually part of the first wave of T-level qualifications and transition programs. So we was one of the first in the country to run these. So since 2020, we've been delivering T-level in digital production, design and development alongside a transition program, as well as T-level in education and childcare, as well as a transition program. We do have more coming soon at our location. Our health and wellbeing program has had a transition program this year. So far, the experience on these qualifications has been excellent. The students receive, I'm just going to move my chat as well so I can actually see my text. So the experience has been excellent and students have made fantastic progress and achieved a lot whilst enjoying their program, transition students in particular. So when I'm talking about these national technical outcomes, I'll try and be more general as I can, but in terms of how to map it to a course, I am going to do it on a digital standpoint. My background is not in education or childcare, health and wellbeing, I'm afraid. So I might not be able to help with some of them questions, but I can try and generalize it as best I can. So first of all, what are the national technical outcomes? So depending on the pathway your areas are choosing will depend on the national technical outcomes which will need to be achieved. Advice and guidance on this can be found on the gov.uk website. If you search for transition national technical outcomes, there's supporting documents on what these outcomes are, and depending on your area will depend on what these outcomes suggest. So within these outcomes, it's expected that all learners are able to demonstrate all of these. So for digital, there are 3 outcomes. In terms of mapping, these outcomes have been developed with close reference to the relevant T-level content. So whatever the T-level learners are learning in terms of their components, these outcomes are meant to map what them components are for the transition programs. For guided learning hours, they are high-level outcomes to provide minimum foundation and maintain level of flexibility. So these outcomes fall within the 120 to 150 guided learning hours. And there are 3 key elements to these, and they bridge the following. The tasks that students will undertake to demonstrate their learning, the content being learnt, so their knowledge overall, and the skills and behaviours being developed. So again, depending on what area you come from, it will depend on what these outcomes are. So how do we build a transition program based on these learning outcomes? So how to start? 3 key points: discover, plan and map. So when I started my position as curriculum manager for computing and games, I first had to discover what the LMI was for my area and how much employee engagement there was for a digital background. I do recommend that being the first starting point. Find how many employees there are within your local area and how much they're willing to engage. With T-level and transition program, the idea is on that employer engagement. So they need to be at the forefront of your programs. The next section is plan. So within my area, we actually use an accredited qualification for the transition program. I know other providers don't use an accredited qualification. So whichever path you take, it's absolutely fine, but you need to make sure that you map these national technical outcomes across. And the idea of using accredited qualification within my area is that the units that were provided mapped across quite well. There wasn't in terms so much of changing necessarily. Also planning how employers will be involved in the planning process and how you'll get learners onto their work experience placements, but also what wraparound content you will have as well. Especially if you don't have an accredited qualification, what wraparound content could you have to ensure that the learners still meet their national technical outcomes? And finally, it's to map these national technical outcomes across. So looking at your qualification you use, your enrichment opportunities, your wraparound content, how are these 3 points going to map to these outcomes? So the study program within my area for the transition program for digital background, again, I don't know nothing about the other areas, so I'm trying to speak from my standpoint on what I would do. So the study program, for my transition program, we use a BTEC First Extended Certificate in Information Creative Technology. So it's the same qualification as our level 2 students who also do a normal information technology qualification, but we substitute units that are relevant to their national technical outcomes. If anyone's ever seen the BTEC qualification, they have lots of units that you can swap and change. And luckily for us, the technical outcomes for the digital program, or the digital transition program, have units that map across quite nicely to them technical outcomes. However, the study program isn't just about the main qualification you offer, it's about the wraparound content you offer as well. So we also offer a level 2 e-safety qualification, which is gateway provided. This gives the good learners some introduction on how to be safe online, especially starting off quite early before moving on to T-level. It gives them that solid foundation. And one of the key technical outcomes for mapping is cybersecurity as well. Master classes, so we offer 4 4-hour sessions for master classes, and I call these curriculum 2030. So what is the future going to hold for your different sectors? How are your different industries going to change in 10 years, or in this instance, 8 years time now? So we do things like looking at how robotics will automate everything, drones, etc. So different sessions that change yearly to keep things fresh and relevant to the different industries. And this type of wraparound content is really beneficial for these learners. We also offer BAPD sessions with what we call our success coaches. So looking at behaviors, attitudes, progression and development. So how are they progressing, what's happening locally, but nationally in terms of teenager behaviors, etc. And we also have our SET coordinators who work on work-related skills. So preparing for industry placements, getting practice interviews on a weekly basis with CV writing, working on complete client briefs, working with employers on mapping these outcomes to different types of briefs. So learners will be given a brief, they'll have a set amount of time to create like a website, a program, for example, and seeing how it maps them technical outcomes. And we also offer guest speakers and workshops, industry professionals coming in and talking to the learners as well. So work placement. So within our transition program at the college, it is required that learners complete 100 hours of work placement. So for anyone who knows the T-level program, it's 315 hours overall. When they come onto transition, it needs to be as closely monitored to that T-level provision as possible. 100 hours gives them a good starting point, is what they would pretty much have on T-level year 1 as well. And it's about getting them learners out and working with them employers straight away to find the different places that these learners can go. So learners within my area attended various workplaces, and we've been assigning learners to placements, often involved in full recruitment process. So sometimes, even within the transition program, learners have been offered full-time positions after leave without having to go on T-level. So the more you map the T-level program to your transition program, potentially more learners will go out into employment after. But it's not just about the placements they get, it's about the development of soft skills that they get: communication, teamwork, writing and verbal skills. It also enhances knowledge and skills within the curriculum and further, and it improves their interview techniques, especially during COVID and lockdown. A lot of these soft skills have been lost, and a lot of confidence with young people we've found in my area has been lacking, especially even in a computer and game setting. So it's about how do we increase their confidence. Repetition with interview techniques and communication and teamwork has increased their confidence over time. So enrichment opportunities, that wraparound content that you can add in that would also meet these technical outcomes. So we've had guest speakers in, recommend trying to find as many guest speakers you can. So we've had Andrew Wilson, who's been the CDO of Microsoft. We've had Jordan Brompton, who's been the co-founder of MyEnergy. We've had Chris Harrison from Ultimaker, and we've had Andy Green, Managing Director of Like Limited. We've also offered guest workshops with these industry speakers. So Richard Askham, who's a speaker and broadcaster, and trips and charity events, getting the whole sort of department involved. So we visited Bletchley Park, gaming conventions, and something for charity, which is a 24-hour game-a-thon as well. Further enrichment could be competitions, world skills, inter-college championships, something that we do at the Grimsby Institute, which is something called Competition Carnival. So a week throughout the year, we compete, all our different courses throughout the college have a competition, and we do that throughout a week and compete against each other. For my area in particular, competitions at the forefront of everything we do, very competitive industry. So the more competitions they get involved with, the better it is overall. And additional accreditations as well. Again, if you don't have an accredited qualification and you are using a different model, trying to find a different accredited courses, smaller quals, additionalities might be beneficial to map them technical outcomes. So we offer Microsoft Office Specialists opportunities, and currently we're doing the Azure Fundamental Certifications by Microsoft as well. So how does this go with the learners' knowledge, skills and behaviours? So within the Grimsby Institute, we map the learners' KSBs on a termly basis. So they'll come in with a baseline. So the knowledge, skills and behaviours they have as a baseline. So what knowledge do they have with computers? What skills can they show on a baseline? What behaviours do they have? And we map that across the year, and we grade it similar to how they would be graded for their GCSEs. And that gives them a good foundation of where they started to where they finished with their knowledge, skills and behaviours. Also gives you a good opportunity to map these technical outcomes with these knowledge, skills and behaviours matrix. I'd be more than happy to send a copy of these matrices if any other organisations use them, so you can see how you can map yours across as well. So due to the way we structure the transition programme, learners develop an incredible set of KSBs with a focus on preparing them for the T-level programme and future prospects. That's the idea of the transition programme overall, is to get them to move into either employment or the T-level programme. So I will just do a quick summary before we go into the questions part. So in my opinion, a successful transition programme doesn't require excessive planning for a completely different qualification. Is benefited by extensive enrichment opportunities, and a successful transition program should result in a well-prepared, well-rounded learner. So breakaway activities. When I got the email regarding this, they said we might have breakaway rooms, but I believe we're just having the chats within for these activities. So a few questions to consider. So definitely find out what the national technical outcomes are for your programs. Another question, do you already run a similar course which already has mapping to these outcomes? If you haven't, or you do have either way, what would be your wraparound content within your study program? And how would you involve employers within your transition program to ensure you meet the national target outcomes? That is everything from me. I am just gonna stop sharing my screen now.
Right, okay, so if you don't mind, Mark, if you could just share the final screen, so we've got the questions there, that would be good. Before we get started with the questions, just as Mark is bringing them back up, there's been lots of email addresses coming through in the chat with potentially an interest in setting up networking for various transition programs. So what I'd like to say, first of all, I will put into the chat in a moment the transition email address. And if you could send an email to that address, yeah, and then if you put in networking opportunity, yeah, and put it with the title conference, then I'll know when I'm checking what I'm mapping it to. I will collate everybody's email addresses and then double check if you've already got an existing relationship manager, and then we'll be in contact with you at some point next week. So that's just to clarify. So if you're interested in any networking opportunities, just like I say, send an email to the transition team. I will put email in the chat in just one moment. So starting off with the first question, Mark has set us a challenge by the looks of it. So he's asked us to find out the national technical outcomes for your program. So that's the first starting point. So we need to go and find our national technical outcomes for your T-level transition program. So what I'll do in just a moment, while everyone starts looking, I'll post in the link. So if you could see if you can find the link yourself, we'll give you a couple of minutes just to find the link, and then we'll see what you've come back with. Right, I'm just posting the link in just for those who might not. Right, I'll put the link into the chat. So if you select that link, I think I might have just sent it to Laura. There you go, should come through. So I'm presuming, Mark, this is the challenge you want everyone to do. Now, what I'm going to do in a moment is I will just see if I can share my screen too. Okay, Mark, so you've asked everyone to find their national technical outcomes for their program. What feedback would you like from that? Oh, I think you might be on mute.
Yeah, just finding out if they've found the different qualifications okay. If they've already got, if they already know the mapping, and how many it is per course, because obviously for digital it's only 3. I'm unsure if it's different for the other areas.
Okay, so there's the challenge. Find your national technical outcome and just establish how many outcomes. So if I give you 2 more minutes to 10:45, then Mark will ask if you can share with you your outcomes. Is that okay, Mark?
Yeah, that's fine. Has there been any questions that I can ask in the meantime at all, or?
At the moment, it's just been opportunity for networking.
Okay.
So it might be worthwhile, because you mentioned in your presentation about networking opportunities, if you can maybe give us a positive from one of your networking opportunities.
Mm-hmm. In terms of opportunities, with who? The employers, or just networking?
Just generally to employers and to your learners as well.
Okay, so with the employers, in terms of networking, when we started the T-level and transition program, it was during lockdown, and it was very difficult at the start for learners to go out into employment. So what we did was have regular meetings with the employers for networking events to sort of plan the course when we wouldn't be in lockdown, and how learners could go out into that workplace. We also networked the opportunities for employers to give learners work opportunities at home. It didn't add to any of their hours at the start, unfortunately. For the T-level program and the transition program, the DFE said did state that learners had to be in a workplace for it to count as hours originally. They've started changing that sort of mindset now. So we did network quite a lot in terms of getting learners some employment opportunities at home, even though we knew it wouldn't sort of add to their hours at the start. But that gave them the opportunity to at least network with the employers together. And we give the learners a lot of ownership to talk to them, to their potential employers by themselves. So we kind of take a back seat and let the learners have the confidence to chat and integrate with that team.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Looks like some of the answers are coming through in the chat, Mark. Some have mentioned 3 outcomes for business. Obviously,
Yes.
we've got the 3 for digital coming through, 3 for engineering. So positive from that, everybody has found the government website to locate their national technical outcomes as well. As you can see, a couple of other sort of questions have started to come through. Some of them are quite, like you say, very specific around other curriculum areas. So land-based, so we've got a question around land-based. Do we have an insight into the technical outcomes? With regards to that question, at the moment, there's been review panels that have been looking at the technical outcomes from that, and there'll be some sort of feedback later on feeding through, and that will come through into our transition newsletter as well. Another question here that you might, before we move on to the next one, Mark, do you formatively or summatively assess these outcomes? If so, what mode of assessment do you use?
Okay, yeah, that would be quite an easy one to answer because we use an accredited qualification, the BTEC information technology one. All the units and assessments are based on that qualification. So when planning the course, I tried to map it as best I could to the T-level program and these national technical outcomes. T-level is obviously very heavy exam based, and with the BTEC information technology qualification, there are 2 exams that the learners must take. This gives them a good foundation on how to deal with the pressure of exams straight away. And in terms of the rest of the units, it's all coursework based as well, but very technical coursework to map to them national technical outcomes. Another reason we use the BTEC is that we can swap and change units on a yearly basis, depending on what the industry is changing towards, but still map to them national technical outcomes. So one of the technical outcomes for digital is based around cybersecurity. There is a beneficial unit within BTEC for cybersecurity already. So that kind of maps that technical outcome quite well straight away.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Also, we have people asking if there's any opportunity that they can have a copy of your knowledge, skills and behaviour assessment framework that you use.
That will be absolutely fine. I will. I think it's best if someone from the AoC gives me the details and I can send it to them.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we can forward that to the events team, and then they can forward it on with your presentation as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to the next question. So Mark has said, do you already run a similar course which already has mapping to these outcomes? So this is where everybody sort of in the room needs to sort of maybe share with Mark what your thoughts are, or if you've got similar courses that you think might help you map to the new T-level transition program. So it's open to you to share your thoughts. Anyone got any thoughts about their mapping?
Just to make a point as well, I know some other organisations that were in the first wave don't use an accredited qualification. With the transition programme, it's very much up to the organisation how they wish to run it, but you still have to map to them national and technical outcomes. So there isn't a right or wrong way as such on how to run a transition programme, but it is to just get them ready for that T-level programme or employment and to map to them technical outcomes. So whilst we use an accredited qualification, it doesn't matter if your organisations don't. And I'm sure the AoC will be able to help put you in contact with some of them other organisations that don't use accredited.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. You'll find that you'll have a dedicated sort of advisor where we would work with you to assist you with the mapping, looking at the outcomes as well. And as Mark quite rightly said, share good practice with you of other providers as well. And again, like here as well, you might have all your specialist curriculum areas, but we can all learn off other curriculums as well, just as we are with Mark and digital as well. Amy has put in her started mapping with regards to her health, related some of the units already, but however, they're looking at the science element as well. And again, that is one of the areas with the transition program T-level health that people sort of start networking together to help build that. Nicole has said she's looking at the DEC level 2, designing the community hub. She's tried engineering construction and BTEC engineering with the overlapping of the units as well, but doesn't feel that's been a positive experience at the moment, and she's not such a fan of BTEC. Okay.
My recommendation is that there are other qualifications out there as well. It doesn't have to be BTEC. BTEC kind of fits for my area. Another award body I did look at as well is Gateway, and they do have a transition program section on their website. That might be potential for you to look at as well. Again, it doesn't have to be BTEC, and if anything is missing out of a study program, especially in your main qualification area, that doesn't map to the outcomes. It's about the wraparound content and the additionalities that you can offer, which would tick that box.
Okay, perfect. We'll do one more question before we move on. Emerging theme is around monitoring, who externally monitors your outcomes with your T-level qualification, and also with regards to if you're not embedding a qualification, how would you sell that to the learners as well?
That's a good question. In terms of if you're not using a qualification for your transition program, it would be what is the unique selling point of that course without the qualification. So it would be that employer engagement as well, and what progression opportunities there would be without the qualification. Without an accredited qualification as well, it does take into consideration potentially what grades would you look for when they come in for a level 2 program. Obviously, it'd be based on your area and what type grades they would need to come in with to get on a level 2. Without a qualification, that makes it a bit more tricky, but it's about how you would sell it to the learner and if the learner's right for that course. So for me, if I wasn't using an accredited qualification, I would look at the unique selling points of the course, which is that employer engagement and the progression opportunities moving forward.
Okay, yeah, I agree with that. With regards to sort of, showcasing it to the students, learners, and all the stakeholders, it is identifying that unique selling point. And the main thing around the T-levels is that unique work experience, giving you the right type of skills to sort of build a successful career. Going back to the question about who externally monitors, if you don't have a qualification in there, what tends to happen is with a lot of providers that I've interacted with, and again from my experience as well, is that this is where you follow the good practice of sort of IVing and EVing already, and this is where we used to use our quality team who made sure all processes were in place, and we also used to invite external stakeholders to come in and sort of do an external moderation as well. So there's different ways that you can target it. And also with regards to sort of certification of the non-qual, a lot of providers have created college certificates that showcase the knowledge, skills and behaviours that they've gained as well. Okay, so moving on to the third discussion point. So this is quite the exciting bit as well around a study program with transition, because this is where it's really unique that you have the opportunity to create a program that fits your learner's profile. So what Mark is wanting to know, what would be your wraparound content with your study program? Is there anything you want to add to that, Mark, before people haven't.
Yeah, I've seen some people asking what wraparound content is. So this can be things like additionalities. It can be, as I stated in my study program, masterclasses. It could be enrichment opportunities, guest speakers coming in, guest talks, guest lecturers. It can be charity events, trips. It can be things with Microsoft, etc.
Okay, so give you a couple of minutes to have a quick, well, actually, we'll give you a minute to have a thought, and then if you can sort of share with us your thoughts and ideas around what you think your wraparound content is going to be.
I've just seen a question from Rebecca. A short digital qual be needed? It really depends what you would want for your study program. For us, we have an additionality for level 2 e-safety, and it is included in part of our wraparound content as well for the full study program.
Okay. Just answering Andrew's question that's just been posted. Are we talking about a full 3-year transition? Transition tends to be 1 year. As we know, the T level is 2 years. Some providers are showcasing the profile as a 3-year career journey. So with the transition being classed sort of like a foundation year, where you're building the skills for the learners to be able to successfully progress onto the transition program. Graham said that he quite likes the wraparound of thinking about the idea of a GCSE science. Again, some of my providers as well with health have embedded the iGCSE as well to support that stepping stone onto the T-level program as well.
Some of the other wraparound content we do for my areas, we get the T-level learners to work with the transition learners. So they actually run sessions with the transition learners as well. That gives the transition learners good wraparound content on the knowledge, skills and behaviours they would get to being on the T-level provision.
Yeah, good point.
Think learner-led sessions, I think, are some of the best sessions that you can run.
Yeah, definitely, because I'm a great believer that we can learn from our learners as well, you know, and they bring in new information to us as well. Will has said he potentially for his wraparound, he's going to think more about the professional behaviours and be able to work independently, especially sort of within digital as well. Again, that is a new skill that's coming into the world of digital, how to sort of do time management, how to organise your day if you're working from home, because that's one of the industries that's changed immensely since COVID. Graham has put he likes the direction of travel for the progression from the student's perspective as well. Barbara said she likes the idea of professional behaviours being the wraparound model. I think as well, you know, as we're sort of engaging with different learners that have been through COVID, that's probably one of the areas that a lot of providers are focusing on are professional behaviours as well. Andrew again has said around his wraparound being towards skills and behaviours for employment. So again, that is an essential skill. I don't know, Mark, if you can just add before we move on to the next question, what your thoughts are around how you've prepped your learners to go into sort of work experience.
Yeah, within the study programme, we have specific work-related activity sessions. So they involve lots of working on the soft skills to prepare them to go out into employment. Obviously, lockdown and COVID did affect everyone, but especially the young learners coming through to college, because they miss a lot of school time where they would be developing them skills. So that was a challenge. So within them sessions, we look at CV building, confidence building, getting out and learners interviewing each other, working on practice interviews. And when an employer comes in, we state to the employer we would like them to have a full interview process with learners before offering the employment opportunity. I think that gives learners the best experience they could before going into that placement.
Okay, excellent. Last point before we move on, Nicole's just said that she's going to be working really closely with her apprenticeship team for the construction, especially around getting their CSCS card. Again, I would fully recommend interacting with other areas within your college, because the apprenticeship profile went through a change from framework to standards, and the way that they do their endpoint assessment, the way that they assess students, is something that you can bring into the transition program. And as Dave said right in the very beginning of the first presentation, it is all about the whole college getting involved, understanding what T-levels and transition programs are about. And you'll find that you'll learn a lot from other departments, especially sort of around the employee engagement aspect as well. Okay, final point of discussion. So we know very much the T-levels and the transition program is all about the employers. Yeah, as we know, the employers help shape the transition and T-level programs. So what we would like from you, and again, I realize a lot of the information has been on the chat, but it'd be really good if someone could sort of offer their thought and idea. How would you involve employers with your transition program? So while you're having a quick thought, Mark, what's your top tip about involving employers in your transition program?
It's about getting the information to them early and having initial discussions during the planning stage. So getting the employers to first come to your organisation, look around the facilities you offer and how they potentially might change the facilities to be more industry relevant. When we started, before we started our first wave, we had employers visit on site and they actually changed how our rooms looked and felt to make it more industry standard for digital computing and games. And then it's about sharing the different qualifications with them to see if they're industry relevant and would they change anything. So it's about them discussions you have with the employer on an ongoing basis, because they're at the front line currently, so they'll be able to know what's working, what isn't, what skills the learners need mainly, in the behaviours.
Okay, excellent. So lots of thoughts coming through on the chat at the moment. The emerging theme is obviously around the employer advisory boards. Again, that's really important that your employers regularly interact with the planning of your program, the implementation of your program, and then also looking at the impact of your program as well. And again, that's what we know Ofsted will be looking for as well. Laura has mentioned that surveys on skills gap, again, linking in with the apprenticeship team as well. Yeah, you'll be able to get a really good overview of the skills gaps that potential employees are coming to as well. Something that is really proactive is making sure that each time you visit an employer, you find out not only what the skills gaps are, but also what are the new trends that are coming through, so you can start thinking about the skills gaps as well. Question here from Debbie: how early do you involve employers before placement, and are placements planned before the start of the course?
Yeah, so my curriculum planning stage normally starts in January, so I have to estimate how many learners potentially I will get on the different programs. From that point, I speak to employers on how many placements we will most likely need, and we work on the different skills that these learners might come in with, because we have a very thorough IAG process where learners come in for globals interviews, and we talk to learners who are interested in these provisions of the employment opportunities they will have. We talk to them about the different employers, and then we speak to the employer as well on which learners potentially might be a good fit for them early on.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Rebecca's mentioned that they're going to be putting on workshops. Yeah, that are sort of going to be mini preparations for them moving on to the T-levels as well. Anel has put that employers come in for breakfasts and they do forums, and they get their staff going out to visit employers as well. Something that we had to do, the previous provider that I was with, we had to go back into industry ourselves. So once a year, we had to do 2 days with an employer to make sure that we understood what was going on within the industry as well.
Yeah, that's something we've done here as well. We call them back to the floor days.
Okay. So we've come to the end of Mark's questions. This is where we open the floor to you for the last sort of 5 minutes. Have you got anything specifically you would like to ask Mark? Do you ask employers about GCSE expectations in their sector?
We do talk to the employers about GCSEs. However, the employers that we've spoken to in a digital background are more interested in a learner's portfolio in terms of digital and what skills they have already. They do have an emphasis for communication skills and English, and especially with computing, maths does take a priority, but they're more interested on the learner's portfolio more than anything else.
Okay, thank you. Question from Rebecca. How do you engage the employers on the scale needed? So I'm presuming that means the time scale, the length of your industry placement.
Oh, okay. So we have quite regular visits with the employers, and we have to do termly meetings with them. They understand the requirements straight away of the transition and T-level programs, and we have contracts that we use with them. If at any point the employer signs off or can't take the employment opportunities whatsoever, we always have a backup opportunity for the learners to finish their employment opportunities. Industries do change and employment opportunities do go. So it's about trying to find different backups that we can use, companies that we've got. And at the minute, we're getting loads coming through the door, different ones.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so as you probably just seen, my colleague has just posted into the chat as well. Again, we're AoC staff. Yeah, we will be here to help you sort of plan for your course. Yeah, we will sort of help you with employment focus as well, and to sort of make sure you're guided towards T-level progression as well. Okay, so as we draw towards the end, this looks like this is the final opportunity for questions. So I would like to thank Mark as well. I don't think there's any questions coming through. Again, the thanks are coming through. So I'd like to thank Mark. He's in demand. He's got to shoot off in a moment to do some more filming. So thank you for your time. Thank you for giving us a great insight into your transition program as well.
No worries.
So thank you. So
thank you, everyone.
Thank you. You've got a couple of minutes extra to go and have a cup of tea, everyone. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the session.
Hi, everyone. I've just put the links to the next breakout sessions in the chat. So if there's no questions, you can just select which one you want to attend and then make your way. So there is a short comfort break. So the next session will start at 11:20.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.